All right, today we're going to look at some questions that just involve guessing techniques. Many of these questions I don't want you to do guessing techniques for, kind of like this one that we're looking at. I would not want to do a guessing technique on this. We can foil these, but what I want to do is kind of identify the patterns that you can sometimes see in the answers. Now, don't get too excited about this because I did choose answers where the pattern actually stood true. If I've taken these before, just completely blind guessing, and it's about 40%. That's not very good, but it's better than a blind guess. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just pretend like the question's not even there. And we're going to look at patterns within the answer. Here's what I'm talking about. So first of all, one pattern within the answer, they all have 12c squared. So you can actually use this as a way of interpreting the last answer. Like if you forget what to do with the exponents, you know it becomes 12c. Go back and look and see what caused that. So here's what I'm looking at in the patterns. I see that they all end in 3d squared. And of my answers, 3 of the 5 end in minus d squared. Well, if I'm going to blind guess, that means these two answers don't match. And as we look at these answers, we can also see that E clearly doesn't look like the other four, so we're removing that answer. So now the question we have is, do we see a pattern that either lends itself to being A or C? I don't see one because this is split evenly between 13 and 5, and this answer is 3. They're all negative signs, so I don't see a pattern within any of those answers. So anything beyond this is just a blind guess between the two. And one of these two is actually the answer. We can actually do this problem real fast and see, but that's not the point of what I'm talking about today. Today we're just going to talk about guessing techniques. So this would be positive 4 CD minus 9, so it would be the negative 5. C would be our correct answer here. But again, I don't ever want to blind guess from you. At least eliminate some of these answers or try to recognize a pattern within the answer. Same thing here. We're looking for pattern recognitions. We're going to pretend like the question's not even there. We don't even see it. We're just going to look at the answers and see what we see. Well, 3 of the answers are binomials, which makes me think that it's neither of these two. And of the 3 binomials, all of them end in 9x squared. So I don't get any hints there. And then the other 2 both have a 16 in the front, so this makes me get rid of this one. And the only difference is between the 6 and the 3. Well, our last guy that left was the h value, and it had a third power. So if I'm going to blind guess between these answers, I'm going to take j. And again, I picked a lot of answers that this works for. Don't think that this is a good strategy. This is not a good strategy. It's just better than blind guessing. But this is actually the answer as well. This is one I hope if you didn't know, you would just do the y equals the question and then y equals the answers. But again, I want you to use this guessing technique when you are plugging in. I don't want you to start at the top and all the way work to the bottom, because you see J would have been the second to last one we plugged in. But if I would have started with J, then I would only have to plug in once. So the guessing technique is not just to get answers, but it's going to eliminate the answers that we can plug in and see. Here's another one we could probably do in actual work, but if we're running out of time and we just need a guess, don't just pick a letter, look at the answers and see what we have. 3 of our 5 answers are fractions, which makes me think that we have a fractional answer. And beyond that, they are dividing by 5. Now, we also see that these 2 answers are identical answers except for their opposite answers. So that makes me think it's H or J. And a lot of times you're going to see inverse functions, kind of like -5 and -1 are. So this answer makes me think G. And again, this is one of the other ones where it worked. That's one reason I picked it. If it were perpendicular, if I would have seen the word perpendicular, I probably would have picked H. These values can actually go into your calculator. You can put it in scientific notation mode, but it's not even necessary. But here's why I wanted to point out this as far as guessing goes. It says if the returning space capsule lands at a random point on the Earth's surface, which of the following is the best estimate for the probability it will land in water? First of all, use some common sense. The land is smaller than the water, so the chances of it hitting on the water is going to be higher than 50%. So these two answers are wrong. But beyond that, here's another thing I want to highlight to you. A lot of times when you're talking about probabilities, the correct answer always has the complement. So what I mean by that is the complement to 80 would be 20, which I don't see that multiple choice answer. The complement to 65 would be 35. I don't see that answer. The complement to 71 is 29, which we just discounted 29 as an answer because it's lower than 50%. So I would guess G on this answer, and I believe G is also correct. This one is not a guessing. I just know that you are going to most likely have the equation of a circle, and it's not a difficult question, even if you just remember this one thing. It's radius squared. So my denominator is going to be, or my equal sign is going to be equal to 81. There's always going to be a plus sign in the middle, which that doesn't help because they all have plus signs in this one. So now the question is, which ones do we choose? Well, the x is clearly an 8, so this answer is wrong. So what we've got to come down to is this -8 or +8, -5 or +5. Well, remember the equation is x minus the h value. So since this is a +8, we choose this one. That one was not a guessing technique. I just wanted to make sure we re-emphasize this because that is one correct answer right there waiting for you. All right, I think it's pretty important to cover this just to make sure. If a matrix shows up, they're not difficult questions, but if you don't know how to plug them in, you're going to have some issues. So what I'm going to do is first edit a matrix. And the first one that I have is a 1 by 2 matrix. And I'm going to plug in these values, -1 and 0. I'm going to now have to create matrix letter B. In this case, I chose to call it B. So I'm going to go over to Edit, Matrix B. This one is a 2 by 1 matrix, and you can see it adapts to what you put in. So if you're not sure, just put it until you get the one you like. So I'm going to go -2 and -1. And then I'm going to exit out to my home screen. And what this says is which of the following matrix is XY? Well, XY means multiplication. So the way we do this is we hit second matrix, and we're going to do correction. We're going to use this matrix, X times, and we really don't even need that multiplication, matrix B, and then we just hit enter, and then it gives you your answer. Matrices, we haven't covered those. It's a standard that's been dropped, but it's a possibility to show up in your ACT, and there's no reason to miss these just because we don't know where they're located. But there they are. And I'll just point out some other things under here, different things you can do in a matrix. They're under the math. There is your determinant. If you hear that word, that's it, DET. Just thinking of some other ones. The RREF is not for this, but you could find the determinant. And if you wanted to do an inverse of a matrix, just use the inverse button on your calculator. So as we take a look at this one, first thing I want to discuss is guessing techniques. If I get completely lost on this thing, what I want to take a look at is patterns within the answer. You see that 3 of these start with sine and 2 of them start with cos, which makes me think, okay, this is a sine answer. Secondly, we see that 3 of the 5 answers have a 60 plus 30, which makes me think it's either between J and K. And then lastly, between J and K, we can clearly see which of those has the strongest resemblance to all the others. So if I were to blind guess this thing, J would definitely be the answer that I would choose. Right, let's talk about this though. I wouldn't need to blind guess this one because there are no variables here. These are all numbers. So I actually can put this in my calculator. I do need to check, and I actually would have had a problem there. These are being measured in degrees, so I need to set my calculator mode to degrees, which is where we should normally start this. And I'm actually just going to type in exactly what I see in my answers. So we have 60, sine of 60 degrees times, whoop, better put my, let me do this a different way. Sine of 60 times cos of 30 plus cos of 60 times sine of 30. When I put this in my calculator, it's going to give me a number. The number is 1. Well, I felt good about the answer J. Let's see if J works. Sine of 60 plus 30. Put this in my calculator, and I have the correct answer. If you wanted to go through and check all of the other ones, you could do that. It really isn't that hard. Second entry, see if I were to change it to the one directly above it, it's minus. See, that answer doesn't match. Second entry, the other one was a cosine, so I could go to my sine and just push in cosine. You can see that that's not 1. And I could change this to a plus sign. That's a 0. And then if sine of this is divided by 2, the other one's going to be 1/2 as well. So I can get my answers. This is a really difficult question rating-wise, but let your calculator do some work. If there are no variables, that means they're all numbers. See what those numbers are. All right, so as we look at this one, we have two variables. We can't put two variables into our calculator, so what we're going to do is assign one of the variables a number. You guys all know by now my favorite number to use is 3. We don't want to use 1, 0, or 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in this equation, and notice the rules. It says for all x's that are not equal to the positive or negative y value, and we're calling our y value 3. So here we go. We're going to type this into our calculator. We go alpha f1 equals, and then we have x over x plus, and again, not y, but 3, plus, not y, but 3 over x minus 3. So we've got this thing set up with y's being 3. We're going to see which one of these equations matches this. Now, I like the pattern that I see between A, B, and E. So I'm going to start by plugging in those. And if I were to blind guess this, just blind guessing, I think I would choose B just by the patterns that I see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in B into my equation. And again, for my B values, I'm going to plug in, or for my y values, excuse me, I'm going to plug in the number 3. So it's going to be x plus 3 over x minus 3. Now, if this equation is the correct equation, when I look at the table, the values should be identical. They are not identical, so I would have guessed an incorrect answer. Now, answer A is very close to this one, so why not, since I already have it written this way, delete the top and just put the number 1, because it's the same thing, 1 over this value. So I compare their tables. Their tables are not alike, so I've got 2 answers marked out. I'm going to go ahead and do E. So E is going to be x squared. And while I'm doing these, I can't do this because I'm working on my calculator at the moment. I should be marking out the answers that I learned are wrong. So this is going to be x squared minus 3 squared. Let's see if these tables match. And there you go. That would have been my first 3 picks anyway. But you see that these tables match in every way. So that means my correct answer is E. So I'm going to go math, and I'm going under numbers, which is where the absolute value is. I'm going to set up fraction mode. And what I end up with is 4 minus negative 3 divided by 4. When I plug this into my calculator, I get 7/4. I'm going to hit second entry because it's going to pull up the same exact thing, because the only thing different about this one is now we are dividing by n. Well, we said n was negative 3, so negative 3 would be 7/3. Now 7/3 is more than 7/4, so right now we can mark off F. And if you want to change these to decimals, so you know, change them to decimals. Remember, that's under math. And then there's the decimal changer right there. But I'm going to keep testing these values. So I'm going to hit second entry. The second equation, we change it to a plus sign in the numerator. So it's going to be plus negative 3 divided by 4 minus negative 3. So this value is 1/7. That is definitely smaller than 7/3. I'm going to check the next one, which is the plus sign, but it's divided by p, which is 4. Still smaller than 7/3. And then the last one tells us to divide by negative 3, and still smaller than 7/3. So G would be my answer because it is the one that has the largest value. Assign them the values that satisfy all the criteria. All right, as we take a look at this one, what I'm going to do is show you how we can put this into our calculator and evaluate these amounts. First of all, as I look at these, I can see I've got a amplitude right here of times 3. This is supposed to go through 1. It's going through 3. So I know it's one of these bottom 3, but we can also show on our graph how we do this. Now, this is going to involve changing modes, but let's take a look and see. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to my y equals, and I'm going to type in the equation that I feel is correct. I'm going to pick J. So I go 3 cos of x divided by 2. So what I want to make sure of is, since this is talking in terms of pi, my calculator needs to be in radian mode, which it is. So I put my calculator into radian mode. Sorry. So that's what that looks like. And I'm wanting to see, when I graph this thing, if my graph looks like these amounts. So I graph it, and you can see we're going this way. I know it doesn't look exactly, but here's the trick I'm wanting to show you. So as I look at this graph, I can see the only thing labeled for me is half pi. And I can see when my graph is at half pi, it is at negative 3. So what I'm going to do is look up that value, half pi. So if I go to second, calculate, and then values. And the value I'm interested in is half pi. So I go pi divided by 2. So when I hit enter here, I'm going to get an answer over there. If it's the graph that I'm looking at, it should be negative 3, which you can see it's not. It's 2.12 blah, blah, blah. So let's try K. So I go to my equation. Actually, it's really easy to change it to H, so let's just do H real fast. Change the 2 to a 3. We then look at the value. And the value I'm interested in here is pi over 2 still. You can see that is also not negative 3, so I've marked off 2 incorrect answers. So I'm going to check the last one here. Let's see if it is 2x. Graph looks like that. Looks a little bit more like the graph we're supposed to be looking at. And then I calculate the value of pi over 2. And there you can see the value is negative 3. So that means that is my correct answer. Right, we're going to start this one off by doing the guessing techniques. I'm going to read the question. We'll just look at these answers here and see if we recognize a pattern and eliminate these things. First of all, J is completely different than all of the others because J has a positive sloping line. Everything else has a negative sloping line. So we're getting rid of J. But usually when we get rid of J for something like that, everything else about it is correct, except for the line slope. So let's see. So we have 4 small circles and 1 large circle. So this large circle is not going to be our answer. We also see that we have 4 circles that have dotted lines and 1 that has a solid line. So it is wrong. And of our other lines, everything is shading below, shading below, shading below, and this one is shading above. So our answer is H here. So if we just pattern here, my choice would be K just on pattern alone. But let's take a look and see if we can learn anything from our information. Remember, we have equal signs and greater than equal to signs. When we have greater than equal to signs, like we have on this linear equation, we'll do this in a different color, this is going to be a solid line. So this one is out because it is a dotted line. It's also going to be shaded below this line because the y is on the left and it's positive, so that answer's out. And then our circle is going to have a dotted line because it does not have an equal to sign underneath. So we already marked this one out. And when we move everything to one side, not everything, excuse me, the letters to one side, it would be greater than 12. So greater than the circle means outside of the circle. So the shading should stay outside of the circle. But again, we do get K as a correct answer in this one.